So let's look right here, you guys. Under blur right here, we've done, mainly what we've done right here is Gaussian blur, whatever it's called, where we can just come in and we're basically blurring out the whole thing. Does that make sense? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, so let's go here, and then we can go, they're mostly slider driven. I don't know what blur more is actually. I can use that one. Let's just go through the obvious ones. Motion blur. So if I come in here and I push my slider, I'll get this sort of going into a motion idea, and this right here, this little wheel, determines which way the motion is going. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, these things are useful, but they're also very limited because they tend to be, now it might be better too when you do this to turn this into a smart object before you do it, so you can go back and readjust it, because if not, it's set in stone. Okay. So let's look at radial blur. So you can see here this little graph what you're getting. This is spin, so let's go to spin. This one for some reason doesn't give you a preview. And then you got quality here, draft, good, best, blah, blah, blah. And what you're looking at, so that one I really spinned it, okay? So let's go to here, blur. Let's go back to that same one, not that one, the radial blur. Let's go to blur, radial blur. And right here, you can see how intense it is. That's what that little graph is showing you. So if I push this up, it's showing you how intense it's going to be. And this one's zoom. So as you can see, it's sort of, watch. So I'm going to put it about there. And it gets that kind of idea, okay? Now, if I go way less on it, it makes more sense. So let's go radial. I'm going to push it way down. You know, and I can get that kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
If you notice right here, it has blur gallery, okay? So I'm going to jump to this second one just because. Let's go to this iris blur, which you talked really briefly about, but I think it's actually a really good tool. So what it does is it gives me this circle idea. Okay, I'm going to put it right on the castle because that's my main area of interest, okay? And then right here is I can blur out around that circle as much as I want and put my focus on this castle if I want. That's a little too much. Let's pull it. I'm going to leave it like that so you can see it. Okay? But this right here creates sort of the transition between how it blurs out, and then this here, I can take these and I can reshape it, and I can move it around. I think this is a really handy tool, by the way. And then I can go here, right here where this little square is. Let me see if I can grab it. And you see it turns it a little more into more of a rounded square idea. Does that make sense? So if I pull it down like that, it's going to be basically round. And if I pull it out, it's going to get, you know. And then I can pull these things out, you know, just based on how much of this I want. And then by over here, okay, so we have this. So this blur slider up here is the same one you've got right here, okay? So that just does the same thing, okay, but it's a slider. These aren't really relevant yet. This light, I don't know if it works in this one. Yeah, it does. So what this does is it will push light things. I'm going to really push it, and it'll just pull them up. Does that make sense? Sometimes it's kind of nice. It gives a little sparkle in the background, which is kind of nice. And then it has a color one. So that's just pushing the color. Okay, does that make sense? Yeah? I mean, that's simple. Is everybody doing this in real time with me?
Yeah.
Okay. Because these are going to get more and more. So I get something like that, which isn't bad. Okay? I should have made it a smart object, and then I could screw around with it. Okay, so now let's go to, So what tilt shift does, as you can see there, is it sort of miniaturizes everything. Does that make sense? You guys have probably seen this before, yes? Okay. What this is a result of, I think what they actually, from what I understand, is they actually developed these lenses to compensate for lens distortion for architectural photography. So instead of having, when you're shooting a building from down here, and it starts to do this because it wants to converge up there, it would sort of make it where it looked like a nice front view. Does that make sense? And I think what it did, I don't know exactly how it works, but I think it had, you could compensate for the two planes. I don't want to get too deep in the woods, you can look it up. But the byproduct of it was it sort of miniaturizes things. People figured out you could do this weird effect with it. Does that make sense?
So cool.
I know it is cool.
It's like all that.
I mean, look how weird it is. Like if you look at,
It's like an old Thomas the Tank Engine.
watch,
from-
tilt shift. I've seen some stuff where they've done like trains, like in village environments, where this one's not good, where they get really interesting. Here. So it's just kind of interesting, okay? You can see what it's doing. It's blowing things out of focus on the top and the bottom and sort of putting your focus right here, okay? So let's look at this. Now, I'm using this type of photography for a reason, or this type of picture for a reason. You kind of need stuff in the background, in the foreground, in the middle ground, sort of a busy environment. Does that make sense? Visually, okay? So I'm going to go up here to Filter, Blur Gallery. Now remember, all these are in Blur Gallery. They're not in the blur. The blur is just your basic tools, okay? So I'm going to go to Tilt Shift, and you can see what it gives me here. So it's giving me this line up here is going to determine basically where it goes blurry. But what this is really, okay, so if I pull this up, you can see I've sort of lost the blur up here. It's up here. So I have to pull it down here, okay? So this is the line where it's going to start blurring, and this is how much of it and how it's going to transition. Does that make sense? So I'm going to pull this, I'm going to pull it down tighter. I'm just going to give you the basic idea, and then you guys can go for it. And then same thing, I'm going to actually pull it down here a little more, because I want to get this more in the this being the focus. And I'll do a little down here, and then I'm going to blur it a little more. Yeah, that's starting to get it. And I'm going to pull this up a little more. And then, okay, wait, let's go back. Hang on. What we want to do here first is go convert to Smart Object. Otherwise, when I push OK on this, it's set, and that's it. I can't adjust it. Does that make sense? Okay. And there's going to be a couple of other tricks we can do in here with these other filters. Okay. So let's go back. I'm going to go to Filter, Blur Gallery, Tilt Shift, and it's kind of kept what I had. And then I'm going to go right up here. I'm going to go OK. By the way, for everything we're going to do today, make sure you knock your images down to 72 dpi, because some of these filters they're really thinky. Okay, so on mine it looks pretty good. It's probably hard to see up there, but if you look over here, if I needed to readjust this, because it's a Smart Object now, I can double click this little Blur Gallery and it pops back up and I can readjust it. Okay, which is really handy. Okay, does that make sense, you guys? I'm going to take, let's try this one. This one works pretty good too. Make a Smart Object. Blur Gallery, Tilt Shift. Oops. Put it right on that church. Blur it more. Okay, let me start over here. So I'm going to go, I've turned this into a Smart Object. I'm going to go to Filter, Blur Gallery, Path Blur. I like this one a lot, actually. I don't want this. So what I'm going to do is click and drag. And you can see what it did right off the bat. I'm going to just do like 2 because I don't need to. You can do a lot of these, okay? I'm going to show you a more complex version of it in a minute. Now, if you look over here, okay, I'm going to put edit blur shapes. There's a little box right here. I'm going to go edit blur shapes. And you can see it just gave me this on this one I have selected. I'm going to click that little endpoint and I'm going to go to speed. And it lets me adjust the speed at different places. So let's see if we can go less here. So I'm going to actually go pretty blurry, okay? And also I can alter these in different ways, okay? So I can curve it. Let's curve it a little bit. And I can start to really shape my, my blur, okay? Now I'm going to really go really blurry here. Let's take this one and go up. Now, let's say that I'm okay with that, okay? If I was going to do something very abstract, it'd be more like this. Now, I'm going to go, so we've got edit blur shapes. Let's see if we can do, that's fine. Now I'm going to go okay. This one I'll have to think a little bit. Okay, so now if you guys look in here, and you're going to see it in most of these things, which is one of the tools that I really love about this. Right here is a mask, okay? Under smart, it says smart filters, and I'm going to click that mask. And now, you guys remember our layer mask, correct? Where we could paint in and paint out, correct? So I'm going to go and get a soft brush. I'm going to get this soft round, and I'm going to knock down the opacity. And I'm going to see how big that is. Make it a little bigger. And I can sort of paint out what I want to reveal in this image, which I think is a really interesting effect, okay, and really easy to do. Does that make sense? So let's go ahead and let's play around with that a little bit. And you can put as many, paths in there as you want. I suggest you try a lot of them. Okay. Let's do a version of this where we have a little more perspective on it that we have to think about. And again, make sure you lower these to 72. Let me go through this and then you guys can try. Okay, I'm going to do this in 2 different ways, but the first one I'm just going to do. So I'm going to go back to my path, filter, blur gallery, path blur, okay? And again, I'm going to get rid of this because I didn't make it, so I don't want it. Why is that not letting me do that? There it goes. Okay, so now I've got perspective here, you guys. You see that? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start right here, and I'm going to pull the path right along that perspective. And I'm going to pull it along here. I'm going to pull it along there. So this one's very easy to see the perspective in it because you can just follow the buildings. I'm going to put a little here, then I'll put a little up here. That's probably enough. Okay, now I'm going to go up here because this is coming towards me. I'm going to want it a little more blurred. So I'm going to go 300. By the way, I'm going to pull this speed all the way down so I'm not looking at it. Okay, and then I'm going to click this one and go 300. I'm going to click this one and go 300. This one. I don't know why it's going back to blurred. Let's just go there. Go 300. That's at 300. This one's at 300. Hang on. Okay. Make sure this one's at that. Okay, then I'm going to come back here. I'm going to go, let's try 100. Okay. Let's see if I can pull this back. let's try. Okay, does that make sense? I went a little harder on the foreground and a little less on the back. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay, so let's go. Wait a minute. You know what I forgot to do, I think? Let's check. Yeah, I did. Okay, but this is a good point. So this is what I get, but look over here. I can't adjust anything because why? Because I forgot to make it a smart object. So I can't even do my masking thing. So let's go back. Let's do this one more time. I'm going to go right click, convert to smart object, filter. So you won't get that option if you don't do it that way. So, and this time I won't readjust it. I'll just kind of leave it as is. So let's go boom, 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 boom. That's good enough. And let's see what these are at. These are at, I want to put it up to 300. And I'm going to check these. So these already converted. It's weird. If you do one, I guess they do. I'd have to change it to have it do that. And then these should be at 100. Okay, so let's go okay. Okay, so I get this. Okay. Now, I'm going to come in here and go back to my layer, my little layer mask. Go to my brush. It's down to 40. And I'm going to paint in this car where I don't want it to be blurred out. But I could leave a little bit of the, maybe the stuff around the back and the front maybe can be a little funky. And now I'm sort of painting in, or painting what I want out. Does that make sense? Do you guys see it? You're starting to get a more, and then if I want to get a little bit fancy, I could come up here and maybe paint out a little of that. I could do a little bit of that. Even though that's not necessarily what would really happen, doesn't matter. It looks kind of cool artistically. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So let's try that, and then I want to show you something else after this, okay? Filter, blur gallery, path blur, get rid of that. And the reason I got rid of the car in the background is I don't want the car to, I want to control what, you know, what gets blurred and all that kind of stuff. So now the car is in focus, correct? Now, you could, when you paint it out, you're getting, you know, you're getting the best of both worlds really, right? So you could do it either or. There's also another thing I'm going to try here in a second I've never tried. So let's go. So now, but now here's the problem. The car is in motion, the tires aren't, okay? So now let's go up to, I'm just going to, just for the sake of being quick, I'm going to make a copy of this, turn one off. I'm going to rasterize this one just for speed. So now I got the whole thing like that, right? I actually didn't even need to do that, but oh well. So I'm going to see if I can do this again. Let's see if we can go smart objects. So I'm going back to the car layer. And I'm going to go filter, blur gallery, spin blur. And now I'm going to take this down here. I'm going to pull this just around that part of the tire. Get that tire spinning. The nice thing about this also is that I don't have to be all that accurate with it. Does that make sense? So now I can go in and I can spin the tires. I got the car in focus, tires out of focus, background out of focus. Does that make sense? So try that spin tool with your thing. Hey guys, I made a selection here. Just stop for a second. Okay, so this is just what I did initially. Okay, so this is all on one layer. Okay, but what I did ahead of time is I made a selection of the car and just saved it. Okay, so now I've got a selection around the car, right? And if I went in there, that'd be a very accurate selection if I was, you know, going in there and making it accurate. So I'm going to come in here and go edit. Now I've got a selection. I'm on my little mask. I'm going to go edit, fill, foreground color. And now it just did all that work for me. Does that make sense? What I just did is I filled that shape with black, which reveals, but I've got an accurate selection. So if I go in and I just make a selection of the car. Okay, you guys see how we could do this either or. And by the way, you guys understand what I just did with the layer mask and the shape that I saved, right? I just filled it, so then I got an accurate selection. So if you wanted to get a really accurate select, and by the way, the reason that I let's see if I still have it on this. Oh, I don't have it on this one. The reason on the this one, I think it was. Yeah, the reason here that I blew out the car is I don't want the car when I start to blur everything to have where I'm not controlling how much blur I got on that car. Is you got to remember, because you'll go in here and go, hey, where's the blur? Where's all those blur tools? Because you're in blur, you're not in blur gallery. Does that make sense? I haven't tried this one. Hang on a sec. Okay, so what this is doing, that's actually really interesting. What this is doing, let's do this one, that'll be our last one. This is the field blur. Okay, so what it's doing is I can lay down multiple, which is really cool. I've never used this before. I can lay down multiple points here and take things in and out of focus all over. Does that make sense? Try that one.